Hey friends, this is Mary from Garden Adventures, and today we're going to be talking about winter sowing. Specifically, what is winter sowing, and we'll get into a little bit about what is not winter sowing. But for today, I want to talk about the containers that we use for winter sowing, when to winter sow, what you can winter sow, the types of seeds, and just talk a little bit about, what is not winter sowing. So let's jump right in and get started. I have been eagerly awaiting this day because I can't wait to get started thinking about spring. I garden in Zone 6B, Western New York, in Niagara Falls, New York, so an urban setting. I won't be starting a ton of seeds this year, but I do have plans for a cut flower garden, so there are enough seeds to be started in multiple methods, and winter sowing is an amazing method.
Trudy Grizel-Davidoff is the person who worked with the USDA
to develop this definition of winter sowing, and her method is the one that I am following in this video. And Trudy does have a Facebook group called Winter Sowers that if you would like to join, you can certainly request to do so, but it is strictly winter sowing. We're not talking about any other seed starting method in that group. It is strictly winter sowing. So what is winter sowing? It is a method of seed starting outdoors in a container during the winter months. The USDA definition of winter sowing is a propagation method used throughout the winter where temperate climate seeds are sown into protective vented containers and placed outdoors to foster a naturally timed, high percentage germination of climate tolerant seedlings. And as Trudy says, if it's not easy, you're not doing it right. I have to agree that this is the easiest method of seed starting. It is the most natural with human intervention. This method will work with all types of seeds except tropical. There are a lot of benefits of winter sowing. First of all, it is easy. As I said before, if it's not easy, you're not doing it right. So just know that if it's feeling a little too easy, you're absolutely doing it correctly. It is efficient. You get a high germination rate from this method. There is no hardening off required, and you get very hardy seedlings. It does not take up any space indoors. You don't need any special grow lights or a specific room to start these seeds. It is extremely convenient, cost-effective way of starting seeds. It also prevents the seeds from being washed away or eaten by pests. And the most exciting part is that it allows you to get your hands dirty during the winter months. Now let's talk about what winter sowing is not. Winter sowing is not direct sowing in the garden in the winter. It is not starting seeds indoors and transplanting them out during winter or very early spring. Winter sowing is not putting flowers in the ground and then covering them with hoop and row cover. It is not planting bulbs in the ground. Sowing seeds in a container and covering it with a screen is also not winter sowing. Lastly, winter sowing is not scary. It is a fun method of seed starting. So winter sowing is a very specific method of starting seeds in a container outdoors that produces a high germination rate during the winter months. I hope this is helpful in understanding what is winter sowing. There are a lot of great methods of starting seeds, but they aren't all winter sowing. So just keep that in mind when you're talking about winter sowing. All right, friends, let's head back outside and talk about the supplies we are going to need for winter sowing. So I have a lot of stuff in front of me, so let's kind of talk through what I have in terms of supplies. You do need seeds, any sort that you would like to start. You need some sort of container. So the milk jug or water jug, the 1 gallon plastic container, is an extremely popular container to use. It has a good soil reservoir and it has a good amount of headroom. But all that you need are 3 to 4 inches of space for soil and then 2 inches of headroom. So these do make outstanding containers. You take the lid off and this acts as your vent. You don't need to add any additional holes, but you do need to add drainage.
Let me demonstrate how to prep this container for winter sowing. So you want to remove the cap and cut a hinged line around the container. I'm using a utility knife, just making that line around 5 inches from the base of the container. I never seem to be able to cut an exactly straight line.
You do need to add drainage to the bottom. So let me do, and I would recommend doing this step before you cut the hinge. So if you poke a utility knife, if you poke a hole and then twist, that's plenty of room. That's a very efficient hole. And I would recommend probably 4 or 5, and I'm going to put one more in the middle. There. That is plenty of drainage in the bottom there. Same with a soda bottle. This allows for a good amount of soil in the bottom part. You can create a hinge. So that is also another method of using the soda bottles. These are, now the clear bottles work extremely well. I did use the green last year because I had several of them, and I had no issues. My seeds all germinated in the green containers. But I know some people don't like the green. So before I cut the slit, I will poke the holes in the bottom here. I put one in each of these little bases. So there are 5 slits in this one. If you live in an area that is very wet, you get a lot of rain, or you anticipate you're going to have a wet season, you may want to put additional drainage holes on the side, just small holes along the side, so that the water doesn't sit in there. You want to definitely make sure the soil is able to drain. You just pick a spot on here that you think is at least 3 to 4 inches. This is more than that, but there's plenty of headroom in here. So as I said, 3 to 4 inches 3 to 4 inches of soil and at least 2 inches of headroom. That is what to keep in mind when you're selecting containers. So I do have a few others that I want to show you. These I got at the Dollar Tree today. This is a white container with a clear lid. So this has about 4 inches on the bottom, and the lid has a little bit of a raised height. It may not be the ideal height, so you could always use saran wrap or a plastic bag or any kind of clear plastic on the top if you want to make more room. But I've definitely seen people use containers very similar to this successfully. This I also got at the Dollar Tree today, and this has about 5 inches of space on the bottom and a 1-inch lid. So this is plenty of room for starting seeds, and it is all clear. So this is a great one. And I also bought one of these foil containers, and it has about 3 inches of bottom space and then 3 inches on the top. So again, another good size container to use. And same instructions apply. You want to poke drainage holes on the bottom and vent holes on the top. So the top, you want to make sure moisture can get in and any heat can escape if necessary. You don't want the little greenhouse to get too warm. So you want to make sure it's a good temperature to get your seedlings going. All right, the other thing I purchased at the Dollar Tree were these, they're called Sure Fresh covers for bowls. I'm not sure if that's backwards, to be honest. I will take a picture and put it up if you can't see these. But these are little plastic covers. Okay, it says it has 4 small, 7 medium, and 6 large. So this is a small. This is an old Proven Winners container that I had. It has drainage holes. It is more than 6 6 inches tall. So you can put 4 inches of soil and it has room for those little seedlings to develop. Okay. Sorry, that required 2 hands. I should have moved back. But this is a good size lid for this type of container. You can poke holes in there and you have your vents at the top. And because these smaller containers do dry out quicker, you could place them inside a larger container. Now 3 of those containers fit inside this large container. So that is an option. Same with this size container. These are slightly smaller, so putting them together inside a larger container works well. You just have to make sure that both containers have drainage holes. You can also use these smaller water bottles, but as I said, the smaller the reservoir, the faster it will dry out on you. So I would recommend going with a bigger container if you can, but if you only want to start 1 or 2 seeds in a small container just to give it a shot, go for it. Just, you have to be mindful of making sure that they don't dry out. That's their only worry over the entire time that these are out, is to make sure that they don't dry out. We went through containers, and the other tools that you need are some sort of utility knife. A lot of people use drills. If they're using a container that has a hard bottom, they just drill a small hole. A lot of people heat up some sort of skewer, some sort of metal, either a nail or a skewer or something that they can heat on a stove and just melt the plastic so they can, easily make the holes in the hard plastic. That is a very good method. It does work really well. Back to supplies. So the utility knife, or some way to make a hole, you can just use scissors if it's a soft enough plastic. Duct tape or some sort of tape to secure the containers back together. So if you're making a hinge like this, you want to make sure it gets taped back together. You can't leave it just open because it really will dry out. You're trying to create an environment that is kind of keeping the heat and moisture in. The vent is there if it does need to escape. The heat needs to escape. But you just want to, I just take one piece and wrap it all the way around. You do want to use potting soil or soil of some sort. You don't want to use an in-ground soil. So garden soil is recommended for raised beds, or garden use are not recommended for winter sowing. You do want to use a potting soil or a good potting mix. This soil is pre-moistened. So I'm going to just add it right in. And the soil will absolutely settle. So as rain hits it, etc. So I do want to, kind of tamp it down to make sure I actually have 4 inches. I did make this mistake last year. I came back out and I realized that I only had like 2 inches of soil in some of my containers. You don't want to pack it in, but you just want to tamp it down so you know that you actually have at least 3 to 4 inches of soil. There we go. In terms of how many seeds to sow in here, that is up to you. I will leave that. There are individuals who love the hunk of seed method, so they just sprinkle seeds liberally in the container. And when the seeds come up in the spring, they just break off hunks of the seedlings and plant the hunk together in one section of the garden. Completely up to you if you choose to do it that way. In a milk jug, I choose to do kind of 5 spots. So those are my kind of 5 spots, and I usually sow 2 or 3 seeds in each. You can do more than that. You can kind of do rows. Depending on the size of the seeds, you can kind of create furrows and do 3 rows within a milk jug. So again, it is up to you how many seeds you decide to sow, how many you want, how many seedlings you want. I had excellent germination. So when I did the 5 spots, at least 4 spots had seedlings in them. So it was really excellent germination, and I felt like I didn't waste seed. But if you are planting a ton of annuals and you're really wanting a lot, then hunk of seed is a great method. Just spread the seed liberally and you'll get a lot of seedlings. Where to place your seedlings, really anywhere is fine as long as they have access to light and moisture. So you want the rain and snow to be able to fall on them. This is where I'm going to put them this season, right in this corner. And I'm going to put them pretty close together as long as they are, not under an overhang. So up against this wall for me would be a great place, but they won't get rain or snow on them. So it is not a good place. So they're going to be out here. I definitely have some squirrels in my area, but I didn't have any issues with the containers last year. They didn't get into them. So this is the spot I'm choosing, and I will just keep an eye on it. Okay, so what can you winter sow? You can winter sow anything except tropical seeds. You can do trees, shrubs, perennials, and annuals. I find cold season hardy annuals are excellent, but you can certainly do warm season tender annuals. They will just sit until the temperatures are warm enough for those seeds to germinate. But I did tomatoes early in the season last year. I actually experimented to see when the tomatoes would germinate. I did them in January, and I did them again in February, and I did them again in March. And the ones that I put out in March did germinate earlier than the ones I did in January, but the ones that I did in January also germinated. It was just a little later. So it is perfectly acceptable to do warm season tender annuals in the winter sowing method. They definitely will germinate, just on their own timeline. This is not a faster way for seeds to germinate, but it is a better, hardier way for them to germinate. If you are looking for a specific timetable, the seeds are going to tell you. You're not telling the seeds when to germinate. The conditions outdoors will allow them to germinate at their own rate or speed, or when they are ready. All right, the big question I see a lot in the Facebook group is when? What is the timeline? Like, is there a schedule of when? So you can start winter sowing anytime after the winter solstice. So it's kind of our official start date is winter solstice. And then anytime after that, you can continue to winter sow into the spring and spring sow, and it works really well. So the only thing you need to look at is the seed packet. And if it is a perennial that requires cold, moist stratification, you want to look at how long that stratification period is. And as long as you're meeting that requirement, that seed can go out. But as I said with the tomatoes, you can certainly put out warm season tender annuals in January. They won't germinate in January. They will sit there and wait for their time. You do not need snow in order to winter sow. So if it's not snowing in your area, that's okay. Just monitor the moisture in your containers, and that's really all you need to do. Honestly, guys, if it feels too easy, really you're doing it right. It's okay. You're going to find a container, put soil in the container, put your seeds in. Small seeds, you're going to press into the top of the soil. Larger seeds, you're going to bury them to the depth that it says. So 1/4 inch, 1/8 of an inch. Or you're just going to cover them lightly with soil. That's it. And then you're going to cover up your container. You're going to secure it closed, and you want to label it. So the other thing you really should have is a Sharpie or a garden marker. Some people, I like to use my duct tape. I write on it with the Sharpie or a garden marker and put it on the bottom of the container. So that way the snow and the rain isn't washing away the marker. You can also label inside the container, and that seems to work as well. A lot of people use a numbering system. I did that last year. It actually worked really well. I didn't worry about which jug was where or anything. They just had a number on them, and I'd check when I was ready to transplant my seedlings. Like number 1 was an aster. Okay, I'm going to plant the aster over here. Your labeling method is up to you, but I definitely would recommend labeling because you won't remember. Even if you only start with 1, I have a feeling by the end of the spring that you'll have more than 1 container. Okay, and when do you move your little baby seedling somewhere else? You can bump it up into a container. If you're growing annuals to plant in containers, you can certainly do that. But you want to make sure there are 2 or 3 sets of true leaves, and then you can go ahead and plant it out in your garden. Even if it's still chilly out, it's okay because your plants don't need hardening off. They've already been outside. So 2 or 3 sets of leaves and you can go ahead and transplant them wherever they're going in your garden. It really is okay. All right, friends, that's going to do it for today. I really appreciate you watching. I hope you enjoyed. If you have any questions, feel free to drop me a note, and I will see you in the next video. Thanks so much.